Call the meeting to order. First item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda.
I move we approve the agenda.
Second.
Been moved and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next item is the consent agenda. Are there any comments or questions on that? If not, I will entertain a motion.
We approve the consent agenda. Second.
Been moved and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next item is public comment. Is there anybody here that'd like to speak to something that's not on the agenda? Jeff, are you speaking to something that's not on the agenda or for an agenda item?
On the agenda.
Okay. All right. Special reports and presentation. Lori.
Where would you like me, at the podium?
At the podium.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. I'll start just by passing my cards around so that you'll all have one. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending. I am the new Executive Director of the Chamber of Commerce, I'm proud to say. Also the new Director of our Main Street program. I will be brief and just give you an update as to what's happening with the Main Street program currently. It is a very, very exciting opportunity that we now have in Baldwin City. As we've now been accepted into the Main Street program, there were only 3 cities in the state of Kansas that were accepted into this, and Baldwin is one of them. We should be quite proud of that. There were some very instrumental people here in the city that were very active in making application for this. It was before I was brought on board, but those people should be applauded because that application was clearly a winning one. So we look to a very exciting future as being part of this program. And the program, for those of you who are not familiar with it, really does focus on the downtown area of each city that is taking part in that program. It focuses on 4 strategic areas. Those 4 strategic areas are promotion, design, economic vitality, and organization. Our purpose is to have volunteers join each of these strategic committees. There will be one committee for each of these areas. Several people in Baldwin City have now volunteered to be on these committees, and we are looking for more volunteers. There are many opportunities to take part in this. These committees will probably meet once a month in order to establish the program and build its future. Did I mention those committee meetings will meet about once a month, but they have not currently met at this point. It is too premature. At the end of July, the Main Street program will be putting me through rigorous training, as they will other executive directors of this program for the other 2 cities in Kansas that are taking part. So I'm very much looking forward to that. And in essence, the Main Street program is simply an opportunity to take advantage of excellent education opportunities for businesses. They will offer education and training for all of our businesses here in Baldwin, and not just downtown businesses. All businesses here in the city will be able to take part in these, for which I'll be sending out emails to let them know when these are scheduled. Everyone is welcome. I have attended 2 of these trainings thus far, and they are quite incredible. They are lengthy, but they are very worthwhile. So that is one major part of the Main Street program. The other part that is instrumental to this, and that is we will have we will have the opportunity to take part in grants that are available to the city, and we'll get first dibs on those, which is pretty exciting. So that is something that will be, as I mentioned, a little bit further down the line, but those grants will be for things like improving buildings, promotional opportunities, and things like making spaces all inclusive for everyone. These just give you some examples, and thereby the delineation of these 4 strategic groups. So for example, promotion, that speaks for itself, but there will be grants available to help promote our city. Design, which really includes hardscape spaces, so that all areas are approved for all people, very inclusive, not exclusive. It also includes things like bringing our historic history, although that's repetitive, but you understand what I mean, to the fore, and making that part of our branding. And that in itself is very exciting. Our town is doing so much of that already. The library and all of its efforts, the Lumberyard Arts Center and what they've done in bringing the history really alive, and the Main Street program will continue to support that and also take part in that. Economic vitality, so opportunities to bring new businesses to Baldwin, get funding for current businesses, so bringing in capital and investment, and also to support and encourage entrepreneurship in Baldwin City, which is so very important. I also serve on the board of CORE, which I hope most of you have heard about now, which is basically connecting opportunities and resources for entrepreneurs. And so my role there is really to help entrepreneurs flourish. And Main Street also is involved in this, so that's quite a nice match. And finally, organization, and really that category deals with leadership training, which we will be able to offer as well for businesses as they exist or as they are coming on and into Baldwin City. So Main Street holds many opportunities, not just for the downtown, which may be receiving future grants, but for all businesses throughout Baldwin City. I think the opportunities are quite endless. And I would be happy to field questions about Main Street. Currently the chamber is thriving, so there's not much to talk about with the chamber, but I would quite happily answer questions about the chamber as well, if you have them.
This might be a good point to bring this up. I was going to save it at the end of the meeting for my comments, but there is a historic preservation conference that I know you,
Thank you,
Lynn,
Brian. Yes.
Library with Wendy, Jeanette with the Lumberyard, Baker University is holding on July 22nd and 23rd. And I was asked to invite all of the council to attend if you can, even if it's just parts of it. That would be great, but
Thank you,
tell
Brian.
us a little bit more about
I
this?
certainly can.
Okay.
This is a most remarkable conference that is coming to Baldwin. And we are so excited about it. There are, in fact, Lynn, you might be able to speak better as to the specific entities that are involved. But in a nutshell, this conference really focuses on preservation, historic preservation. There will be a speaker. The Main Street director from the state of Kansas will be there to speak. Tom Holland, our state senator, will be there to speak. And there will be some really wonderful speakers from the Historic Society, from Baker University. We will not only learn about preserving historic buildings, but we will also take tours of Baldwin City and look at our buildings and talk about the beauty of that history. There will also be a celebration, if you will, meet and mingle at the end at the Lumberyard Arts Center, which should be quite wonderful. This is all held at Baker at Rice Auditorium. To register for the conference, again, a 2-day conference, you can register on the city's website. It is a free conference for anyone to attend. The only price that could be included, and that is optional, and that is if you would like to order a box lunch for one or both days, but that is not required. There will be coupons available for some of our restaurants here in town to encourage you to visit them as well, so they are taking part. We are expecting the possibility of 200 people in town for this, which is incredibly exciting, so we will bring business to town. A lot of visitors will be staying overnight, so many opportunities to increase business and bring an awareness to Baldwin City, not just for our historic beauty and significance, but also for just bringing business here and putting Baldwin City on the map yet again. Thank you
That
for
was wonderful, thank you.
bringing
I
that
couldn't
up.
have done that.
I bet you could have. Other questions?
All right, thank you, Lori.
Thank you. Thank you for having me tonight. Appreciate it.
Next item is old business, the ordinance for sale and lease of city properties. Is there anybody from the public here to speak to this? All right, council discussion? Everybody have a chance to review the ordinance? It's not- The ordinance for the sale and lease of property, didn't get into the packet.
I didn't see it.
Has it changed since the one I've seen before?
Yeah.
I'll see if I can pull it up in my email, but it's gonna take me a second.
Yeah, we did. That's why I messed it up.
I have my copy up here, you know, we'll just pass it around, so
Okay.
everybody can read it.
Okay, sorry.
While we're waiting, I would like to address something that came to my attention, that newspaper articles that were in the Lawrence Journal World that a lot of people probably read, stated that the council approved the lease of the new old police station. And I just wanted to correct that, because that is not true.
It's not that anymore, is it? Yeah, not so.
So with the exception of it changing from policy to an ordinance, is the only other thing that changed the listing of local real estate agencies? Is that the one major difference there?
I think it was in the policy too.
Okay.
It just
There was some, it sounds different for some reason.
It's
Maybe-
because it will only be after it's been listed.
Okay.
14 days.
There it is. Okay. Yep. It's good. Yep.
Any discussion on that? Ordinance?
In the other one, it was talking about the sealed bids and that kind of thing that are supposed to be coming for bids for sale or lease of property. And that is not included in the one that we just read. But it does say at the end that it's approved by the council, so I'm wondering if that's all encompassed in that one statement, approved by the council.
I would think so. I mean, is your question, Julia, like I'm trying to remember back to the old.
If all
version.
sealed bids, contracts, everything is encompassed in the statement, all sale or lease considerations and contracts of city-owned property shall be contingent on the approval of the city council.
I would think that would all be included. I mean, it has to come through here in order to be approved based on this.
Any other questions or comments? Not, I'll entertain a motion.
I move we approve the ordinance for sale and lease of city properties.
Moved, is there a second?
Second.
Moved and second, Corey?
Aye.
Brian?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Motion passes. The next item is the new business budget resolution revenue neutral. Would you like to have the floor?
Just a summary of what you're being asked tonight to do is make a decision on whether you want to send to the county a desire to keep a mill levy level or accept the revenue neutral rate that they have given us. And just as a reminder, revenue neutral rate means that the revenue in the city, within the city accepts, stays the same as it was this year actually, stays the same in 22 as it is in 21. So there would be no increase in the revenue. And by default, that means the levy for the taxpayer would go down if revenue neutral rate is accepted. I know this body has talked extensively in both committee and as a whole about the impacts, long-term and short-term impacts. The current budget is assuming a revenue neutral rate assumption for 22. So the real outlook or impact that we've talked about is a long-term impact. I say long-term, anywhere from 2 to 5 years out. As that number grows, as the number of years grow, obviously that impact grows with it. We've talked a little bit about the flexibility you have should a need arise for additional revenue. One of your obvious choices is to increase that levy or increase the revenue you receive within the city at any point down the road. I think this is really new structure and new territory for the state of Kansas, in that most entities look at a level mill levy as raising no property taxes. In this case, the focus is no longer on levy and it's now on revenue itself. I'm not sure if the public has caught up with that, obviously, but that's kind of a summary, I think, of where we had been as a group in discussing. Just as far as timelines are concerned, we've got until July 20th to submit to the county the desire for either revenue neutral acceptance or not. If you have a revenue neutral acceptance, then the schedule goes on just like it always has. We'll publish a public hearing for the budget, adopt the budget when finished. If you go above that revenue neutral rate, then that extends out. The public hearing actually gets published for both a public hearing for the revenue neutral rate, going above the revenue neutral rate and the budget. So there'll be two public hearings in that order. Can be the same night, take two votes. That can only take place between August 20th and September 20th. So we'd still publish it, but it would be after that August 20th. That would give the public an ability to know what was being decided and have an opportunity to come in and talk about what was there. So that's the request tonight. There's no formal action that's needed for, or I'll say that differently. There's no formal resolution that the county would need in order to understand where the city sits. What we're asking for is a vote one way or the other from this body so we can proceed as you wish, as you see fit. So that's where we're at, Mayor.
And just to clarify, this does not set our mill levy now.
Correct.
So if we choose for a resolution that's not revenue neutral, the next meeting is when we'll set our mill levy and then publish that one before the August.
Right.
hearing. Does that make sense?
So does the mill levy go down if we stay revenue neutral?
Yes, it does.
Then isn't that gonna be harder to bring the mill levy back up? later?
Depends on what your revenue is.
No, it all depends. I mean, yes, you would have to bring it back up if you wanted to recapture, what we don't capture this year. But that's the decision the council gets to make every year now because of the SB 13. If we want to do anything above revenue neutral, we have to come in and publish it and have a hearing and talk about why we're going to actually accept the mill levy. So in a certain case, we may actually have to exceed a revenue neutral mill levy if there were a reason to do it in the budget.
I don't know if people understand that it possibly could go down, but then it could go back up, and I'm not sure people understand that, and getting the mill levy back up is gonna be harder, right?
Well, I think if we position it, in my mind, how it impacts their wallet, right? So if we give them back $1 or don't take $1 this year, we may have to ask them for $1.50 next year, but they still got to say, so it's not like there won't be a rationale to ask for that. And by the way, the $1 they saved this year, they got to keep. So I think it just forces the discussion out in the open about why we want more revenue, why we need it, what it's for, and have the public come in and say, well, agree, disagree, provide input to that. But I think it gets away from actually even looking at the mill levy anymore. It's going to be more about what the revenue is, and based on what the assessed value might go to, you might not have to raise the mill levy. Because you'll get, if you just accept that, keep the mill levy flat again next year, you may get enough increase that you don't have to raise it. It just gives us more options. I don't say they're going to be easy options, but it gives us more options. And I think the public will understand. If we explain, you kept it last year, we're going to ask for some of it back this year, and here's why.
Any other questions for Ben? Before we get into
So, assuming that we accept not assuming, but if we accept the library's request, that portion of our goes revenue, we wouldn't be going revenue neutral anyway.
Correct.
Right. So we may not want to use that term because I don't think that's what we're doing if we do move forward with the library's request. So I kind of feel like we have to have that conversation first.
Right.
I think we will,
Might
once
be a
we
little
get to
clearer.
the discussion.
Okay.
Side of things.
And keep in mind, there's 4 funds that are tax supported, property tax supported, right? The general fund, bond and interest fund, and cemetery. Those 3 you have direct control over. Library obviously is your 4th.
Right.
So that impact revenue neutral, that the number we got from the county impacts all 4 of those. But it impacts it as a group. So they don't tell you what general fund mill levy is and what the library and what.
Okay.
So you guys make that decision. The county just says, here's the total.
Right.
Yeah.
right to the point that you guys can tell us about the discussion that you had on Friday. I know you had a report.
Yeah.
It made sense to me, but if we can just share it.
Yeah, I think what came out of the work session was there was some thought that perhaps if we accepted revenue neutral this year and then went mill levy neutral the following years, that there might be some impact, negative impact on the existing property that was, this year. And I think as we walked through, we figured out that there wouldn't be an impact in those scenarios. The only way it would ever potentially negatively impact existing versus new or new NPR is if we tried to make up the rebate that's part of the that program. And I don't think we've ever talked about doing that. So I think what we came out of the meeting is there really isn't an impact to existing by going revenue neutral this year or in out years.
Let's take public comment and we'll get to council. Is there, Wendy, would you guys like to speak to this agenda item, or Gerard?
I'm Gerard Arontovich, President of the Library Board.
I'm Wendy Conover, Director of the Library. I'm Chelsea Paxson, Secretary for the Library Board.
Hi, I'm Barb Matthews, President of Friends of the Library and a retired library employee.
And I'm Randy Rezac, also on Board of Trustees, serving as Treasurer. Okay?
Thank you for having us.
Yes. And so, I think you've all had this piece of paper, right, sent to you, and it begs the question of what was just discussed, we would like to stay, our request is to stay mill levy, level, if you will. Wow, say that twice. And so simply, I won't read all this to you, but simply the difference between that and revenue neutral is $6,500. Our intent is to use that extra funding, as we've all discussed in our work sessions, is to help out our employee pay gap issue. Questions? You want to talk more about that? I think it's that straightforward with the SB 13 complexity, right?
Thank you, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak to this agenda item? All right, council discussion. So, yeah, I agree with Scott and Corey, I guess, that council chooses to accept the library request. That's an easy answer tonight. We're not staying revenue neutral anyhow, so we plan on the extra hearing and move forward, and then the next council will discuss, and we'll probably need to do a little bit of discussion tonight on what we want to do with our mill levy, or with our funds, I guess, let's say, funds that the city side receives, so. Right. With that, Brian, do you have any more questions on?
Just about the library, and I may have to ask you guys out here. It seemed like when we had that work session that the request was larger than $6,500. I remember $10,000.
That's what I had.
Per year. So I feel like, and I will respect what the library board decides to do. I just feel like we're short a little bit on that. Does that meet the needs, do you feel?
One thing is given.
If you can step up to the mic, just so people at home can hear you.
The one thing holding us back is that the charter language that limits us to the 4 mil.
Right.
We're capped at 4, so that's why we're asking
So
for what we're legally allowed.
Right.
under the
So yes,
cap
if-
ask for.
right.
Yeah.
If we wanted to bridge the entire pay gap or compensation gap we have, it'd be a lot more than that. Yes.
We understand that when SB 13 was passed, that the conversation changed. We've been talking with you for 6 months prior about lifting the cap. When SB 13 came in right in the middle of our conversation, everybody kind of shifted gears, and I really want to acknowledge that it was a lot for all of us and a challenge for all of us to understand how to navigate that. So we feel this is the best foot forward for 2022, and that's what we're asking for.
Mm-hmm. I think our previous discussion was ultimately moving the cap to 5 mil. Mm-hmm.
And I think at that point in the conversation, before SB 13 had passed, you had already assumed that you were going to absorb the assessed value, right? There was no threat of it.
we've been doing that for decades. I mean, that was we always hold the mill steady at 4 mills, and that was just, the plan is always, and then we didn't really have this term revenue neutral, we hadn't been introduced to it.
Right, and then
And then it was, so.
doing our fiduciary responsibility, you know, we budgeted accordingly.
Sure.
Yep.
So, not a commitment, but would you guys anticipate then next year coming back and looking for, and whether the ordinance even I don't know if the cap ordinance needs to stand with the new SB 13, but.
I don't know, I mean, you still have to probably remove the charter ordinance, but yeah, with SB 13 now. It's
So
kind of
whether
changed
that's
out.
there or not, I mean, is it intent to come back in and talk about a higher mill levy to get where you want to go?
Again, in my mind, we do our fiduciary responsibility, decide how much of the gap did we close here?
Okay.
Or what other programs that the library wants to offer, and explain that to you, and then we do, you know, first of all, we calculate the financial impact, and then let you all decide.
Right, and I think what removing and replacing the cap would do is it would allow us more flexibility. Right now, we're in a spot where we'd love to have, you know, a few more dollars, but that cap is there, and so that puts an artificial ceiling. If we were at 5, it doesn't mean we're going to ask to levy 5. We may ask to levy 4.2, because that's what we feel we can meet our responsibilities with. So that would just introduce that flexibility. We continue to communicate with you all about it moving forward.
Good answer, definite maybe.
Probably no different than your city budget, right?
That's all you can say. That's literally all you can say.
Give me the crystal
I
ball.
think your
Yeah.
approach is good. If it, you know, like we're gonna have to do next year is come forward with what we want to spend the extra revenue on.
Right.
I mean, all of us are gonna have to come forward with that.
We participate in the public hearing, just like
Exactly.
you would have to,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Mhm.
So,
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So yeah, I think, I mean, we can start with that conversation. I don't see a reason why not. What would we do with the extra? It's 95,000 that if we accepted the assessed value. Now, another conversation that probably should precede that is you don't only have 2 decisions. There is, there's all the space in between. So, I mean, we maybe need to decide if maybe take the temperature. Are we feeling one or the other? Or does somebody maybe suggest something in the middle? Not accepting all of it, but some of it. Where are we? I guess, and then maybe we should talk about where to spend the 95. I know where I'd like to see it go if we were to capture the 95.
Well, and I know in committee, we talked a little bit about that, you know, we are in the middle of a pay study. And we're anticipating that pay study is going to show a low salary for our police and fire and public servants in our community. So we know that is probably on the horizon. So that was part of the discussion. Do we accept part of it so we can start those raises next year to limit the
Blow.
the thing, or do we wholly wait until that pay study's out and then next year tackle it how we need to? So that was kind of the discussion in the committee, was, you know, which way. So that's really what we wanted to discuss tonight, so that the committee could go back and kind of formulate that mill levy and come back and say, hey, you know, this is how much we need to take to anticipate part of this. Because again, until we get that pay study done, we really don't know. We're trying to plan for the future, and trying to anticipate as best as possible.
And I know when we get to Julie's Public Works Utilities report, there's needs that come up throughout the year that maybe we didn't necessarily budget for, but urgent things happen. You'll have a few things that we'll talk about here later, and I just wonder, as those things come up and we haven't necessarily budgeted for them, but do we look to this money we capture to use for those type of things too?
You kind of get in the root of where we I think in committee, ended up having some philosophical questions. You know, we had a lot of good discussions, but that's kind of where it came from. You know, do you favor, you know, sort of building your budget from the ground up as revenue neutral and then adding on based on if you need extras? Or, I mean, do you like it the way it's always kind of been, where it feels like there's a little bit more flexibility? I mean, are you in those instances taxing more than you should? You know, that's kind of, I always feel like it's gonna be well spent, but at the same time, you know, as we've talked about, it's gonna get spent. You know, it's likely gonna get spent if it's there. And so, you know, we kind of ended up getting really some good conversations out of that, you know.
Yeah, I think Scott kind of brought it up is, and I would agree with, I think you start every year, you know, revenue neutral, and you build on that, and the staff comes in and kind of tells the council why they need more, so that way we can go tell our constituents why we have to, you know, get more from them. So I like that approach. And that, I mean, yeah, like Corey said, it was a great conversation in the committee. It's just where do we land? I think the committee, and Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, it was pretty much a consensus in the committee for tonight, this resolution, that we're going to exceed revenue neutral to get the library what they need for their staffing. So
It's an individual council decision, but
Correct.
we assuming that that's the case, then we have a little bit more time to figure out, does the city portion, the 40 mills of the 44, do we want to stay revenue neutral, or do we want to drop to 38, which would be, 40 mills would capture the assessed value increase, which is the $95,000. If we go revenue neutral, it drops like 38 point something. So I think what we have to decide, and to your earlier statement, we actually have the flexibility to do any mill levy we want. There's nothing that says we have to stay flat.
Right.
And there'll be organizations in the area that probably won't because they have needs. So it's really, what mill levy do we want as a city, and what's our justification to go ask the citizens for it? That's really what it comes down to. And the vehicles are, if you're doing anything more than what you got last year, you got to come and talk about it. Right.
And that's the only difference. You could, forever, we could have not assessed value. I mean,
Exactly.
We've always had the freedom not to accept it. Now there's a hearing, and now it's forcing our hand to have these conversations, when otherwise we probably wouldn't have, because that's the way we always did it.
But I'll add that all our departments did get fully funded based on not accepting the assessment evaluation.
And those are always difficult, you know, so that we met the requirements. You guys all went through the work sessions and kind of saw and heard from them. And so I think they're all comfortable that they got to where they were comfortable for next year, but there's a list of projects behind that any more money and they just start doing those, right? So it's not necessarily, there's not enough money to do everything that needs to be done. So the question becomes, do you just take as much as you can get and you do as much as you can, or do you just try to do it in a smart way? And I think as we go through more strategic planning, I think we'll be able to specifically focus and explain why we're asking for more. And that's why I don't have a problem asking for more if we can explain why, and then we'll get feedback, and if it doesn't land well, we probably shouldn't do it. But to me, it's that more of that planned expenditure as an organization that I think everybody would appreciate and understand. And I think would be more fiscally responsible. To your point, we're gonna have to raise the mill levy at some point. And people are gonna have to pay more tax dollars because costs go up every year. I mean, it's gonna happen, but in the past, we just haven't had those discussions. And I think to your point, what's really changed here is everybody felt good about keeping your mill levy flat every year. It felt like you weren't raising my taxes. That wasn't the case, right? Because the assessed value goes up, mill levy stays the same, they're actually paying more taxes. And it just felt like a little bit of a misdirected conversation. We're forced now to take that off the table. We have to have a conversation about, no, here's what your taxes were, here's what they're gonna be, and here's where we plan to spend it. We'd like to, with your support. So back to what we're talking about here, I don't mind trying to get ahead of some of these things, but to my earlier point, if we assess it and we get it, it's gonna be spent. So I'd be more inclined to go something above revenue neutral if we, as a group, targeted at something and basically made it off limits, right? Saying, if we do believe we have some expenditures coming, that we maybe want to lessen the blow in year 2, 3, and 4, we take a little bit this year and make sure that it's there in next year's budget, so it reduces how much we might have to ask for next year. I'm not sure how we do that in an organization, but I'd be supportive if we believe raises are going to cause significant movement, that we take some of above revenue neutral to try to get ahead of that.
just hard to hit that mark because we don't know what that number's going to be.
Well, that's the problem. The timing of the survey is just not good.
Right.
Well, I mean, the bottom line is if we accept it, we take it in, the revenue in, and the survey comes back, we don't have the big move that we have, we don't ask for it next year, right? We don't have to ask for it again.
Right.
I mean, we can just keep it flat. I mean, it really lets us make these decisions every single year. I think what everybody's afraid of is our mill levies doing this, which they probably will. But I think it's better in the long run than just a straight, steady, mill levy flat and assessed value going up. I think we can talk to it when we do have to do it. Some of what we discussed in the committee.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, I like your approach, Scott. This bill's definitely it's got a lot of problems, but the beauty of it is it does allow for transparency. So if we need more money, the citizens know exactly where it's going. So that I do like, and I think it will make us be more fiscally responsible. Because you're right, yeah, we say, yeah, we don't raise the mill levy, but that assessed value keeps going up. So essentially, I mean, mill levy, so.
And when the years when the assessed value goes down, we have to raise the mill levy
Right.
to get back to revenue, even to get to revenue neutral. So it has happened in the past.
Right. Yeah, to have, I don't think you can make a generalized statement about, we're talking about this fiscal year. So, I mean, it's going to be different every year, just as you said. I tend to just err toward kind of leaving things the way they've been. I feel like this complicates things a little bit. Especially this year, I know that we're going to have this heavy hits the budget once the study comes back, and we know we're going to be increasing employee wages. I would hate to get to that point and then say, it's getting a little tight, how are we going to do it? Whereas we could have already dealt with some of it the year before. So I'm in favor of capturing some of the assessed value, based mostly on that. What that number is, I don't know. The only other part of it too, I guess if we want to talk about years beyond this year, or I guess the year we're talking about, how is the library going to be affected? Are we going to have to do this every year with the library, where the library is going to have to come and say, well, we need our part, and you're the 4 mil pass-through, or however many it is at that point, through the city? I mean, SB 13 sort of seems to complicate this process more than I think maybe it should. That's where I stand.
We've had brief discussion over it. No, I mean, and Corey and I have came to agree to disagree on this, where I think that it allows for a little bit more transparency on talking more dollars and cents on things, gets tried to push away from the mill levy stuff. I'm on the side that, I just don't want us to take what we don't need from the citizens. If we don't need it, shouldn't take it. If we need it next year, we have to explain it to the citizens. So that's my perspective on all this.
So should we shift back to the library? And was that what we were going to focus on tonight? Because we still have.
We need to focus just on revenue neutral or not revenue neutral.
Okay,
That's
like
it.
Corey said, so
if the council's good with accepting that, then that is pretty much.
Right, so that's to your point, that we need to make that decision tonight.
Right.
To let them stay mill levy level.
Except this, that's regulation.
I like mill levy level.
It's too hard to say.
But if we make that decision, then this conversation continues, and the final decision on what we want to publish for our budget will be made at the July 20th meeting. Now, that will be a maximum. We can set that, and then we can come in to what we actually authorize at somewhere at that number or lower.
At what point do we talk about the cap for the library? What to do with it?
Well, that's a charter ordinance,
It is,
so that would be an agenda item on its own.
I would like to see that.
Probably have a year to do that. But the sooner the better, so they know how to operate, yeah, I agree.
Right, I see that gap, and to me, if you look up how many hours the library is open, you're talking like 50 cents an hour to fill that gap if that's what they wanted to do. So for me, just having that removed, that's where I stand. It sort of opens the possibilities of getting to where they need to be now, instead of waiting until next year. But I understand, I respect the decision that what they want to do.
Yeah, I'd be in favor of removing the cap at some point.
Well, I think so too, because I've watched the library, I've lived here for 50 years, so, but with Wendy as the director and all of it, or staff and everything, their wages aren't what they should be, not even close to what it is around the area, different cities in the area. And besides that, there's so many new programs, there's so many computers that people can go in and use. And, there's just so many things that are being done now. And this 4 cap mill levy for them has been there since the library's been here. So it's time. That's where I stand.
So on revenue neutral, we have a motion. It does not have to be a resolution. It just has to be a motion to either stay revenue neutral or to go exceed revenue neutral. That's what the motion has to
Is that where we're all at? Nobody's in between?
be. Well,
No,
no,
we don't
it's
have to make a
revenue
decision
neutral,
yet.
so it's either.
Right, okay,
either
yes,
it's-
yes,
if
yes.
you're going partly,
Yeah.
you're exceeding.
Right,
So
right.
that's, that'd be the.
Correct.
We have a motion on
I'm
that?
good with
Scott moves.
that.
Okay, Scott moves that.
I move that, based on the library's request to stay middle levy level, that we notify the county that we will be exceeding revenue neutral for
Second.
2022, sorry.
Second.
Seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next item under new business is the well ordinance. We need you here to speak to the well ordinance. If you could step up to the mic and state your name.
Jeff Flory. I own the car wash 219 Highway 56. So apparently this ban has come about because city staff thinks that there are safety issues. And I just wanted to point out that the current code that the city has really provides for all that. 15-123 prohibits cross connections. 15-124 requires backflow devices. So I really don't think that the safety of the water system is at issue if we just enforce the code that we have. That there's no reason to completely ban water wells. In fact, the environmentally responsible thing would be to use wells where, at certain places where you can use non-potable water and you're drawing the groundwater at the point of use and putting it back in for sprinkler systems, rinsing cars, other industrial uses. And so visited with the state water resource engineer about this too, and they agree that really that is the best way, environmentally friendly way, instead of using water that's being drawn out of Clinton Lake or the Kansas River, going through the whole treatment process and then pump the Baldwin, to just end up rinsing cars or sprinkling lawns or your garden or whatever. So I really don't think that safety is the real issue that we should be talking about. Maybe how to permit wells, provide applications and permit the wells and enforce it instead of just banning them. And if the real reason for the ban is to have a monopoly on water and keep the revenue flowing, well, let's be open and honest about that and let the people know that's why we're banning wells. Really, it's no different than the electric system. You know, if you're going to ban wells, you might as well ban generators and solar panels so that there's no chance that they can backfeed into the grid and cause a problem too. So I would just ask the council to consider why we're doing a complete ban, and if we really need to, that maybe we should work within the code we have and maybe discuss how we permit certain applications. That's all.
Jeff,
Thank you.
anybody else like to speak to this agenda item? Okay. Council discussion? And we spoke about this extensively in the utility committee. Why I understand your sentiments, I disagree. I think that there is a level of failure with backflow devices and different things, not to mention staff time to verify that it is cross-connected with city services. And then our billing system, I mean, our billing system is all, for even our sewer, it's kind of connected to both. The water meter is how we bill for our sewer system as well, so.
Can I add, I'm sorry.
Sorry. This council discussion once we start that. So that is my opinion from sitting in the utility committee, discussing with staff, listen to their recommendations. I know we did get an email. I had it sent out to all council members from a citizen that had a well denied 20 years ago. And so I think for me, that showed, well, there has been a precedent set. 20 years ago, they were banning the wells, and they're still wanting to ban them today. So I mean, I understand the environmentally friendly side of it, all that stuff. I think really what it comes down to me is there's just no, in my opinion, there's no true mechanism to really verify that somebody has not crossed both with our public water system. So that's kind of the struggle I have. But hear your guys' thoughts, and yeah. And this is the second reading of the ordinance. Oh, I would mention too that it was added that it was the same as what our sewer system was, that if it's within 200 feet or outside of 200 feet of our water system, then somebody could have a well. Just the same as our septic systems are outside, right, am I right, consistent in that one.
You repeat that one more time, so outside of, 200 feet outside
So
of
if
access to city water?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, if it's outside of 200 feet to access the city water system, then it does allow for a well until, I believe, water system comes within the 200 foot, and then they have to connect.
I'm guessing that's your property line, not where you want to put the well, right?
Correct.
Yeah, it's a city property.
Okay.
Thoughts? Julie, I know you guys talked about this extensively, and have talked about this extensively.
Well, the utility guys know a lot more than I do, that's for sure. And their recommendation is to not allow the wells. And they're also concerned about the cross connection. I tend to have to agree with the guys that know what they're doing. What do you think, Brian? You were there too.
Right. I did some informal research on cities that allow this, and there are some that do, varying sizes. And it seems to me that most of the places that do have the capacity of staff to go check on these sorts of things are full departments. That's something we lack. A lot of the smaller towns that I looked at have a very similar ordinance to this. I understand the environmentally friendly part of it. I agree with that. My neighbor who emailed me, and then you all saw that email, I agree with him that it'd be nice if we could have wells that would water trees and plants. But we just don't have that staff capacity to check on it. And let's say that if a well costs $10,000 to $15,000 to drill and set up, I'm not sure if that's true. I've heard that. And you only have a few people in town doing it, but we're devoting staff time to just 2 or 3 items to go check on every year if they have to, if that's what a permit would do. I'm just not sure that we can handle that.
I did the same thing you did, Brian. I researched other cities, and yeah, it's, for a city our size, that's my biggest concern. I'm all about being self-sustained. So I struggled with this a little bit for that reason, but we don't have the capacity, we don't have the resources to be able to make sure that it is safe, it's not contaminating our water source, so. We just don't have the means to monitor that.
That's the challenge, maybe as the council, to get us to think about conservation, sustainability. You know, for as long as we've been on here, water has been a topic, whether it's
Oh, absolutely.
wasteful splash pads and things like that, but those are real feelings and valid points. I know that you can't just go dig a well, but other ways that we can focus on water and sustainability. It's something that maybe we can think about as we move forward with planning.
And for that reason, I think that's another reason we probably should allow wells, is we should protect our water table. So if we ever do explore options.
I do think that we've mentioned, I know in committee meeting that we've mentioned, I also believe that we've talked about it here, is protecting the city investment, which is the revenue, it's the citizens' investment. So I do think that that has been mentioned in meeting before.
I'm glad you brought it up too, that your wastewater is measured on your intake. So however much water you bring in, it's not, there's no meter on your, going to your sewage line heading out to the city main. There's no meter on that, it's based on whatever you take, and then we know that's what, and that would completely complicate all that. So you have other residents in town paying for water treatment on water that they didn't invest on bringing in. Kind of jumps out at me.
Is there any way I'm getting in this conversation?
You have to, well, we've closed down public comment right now. So once we close down public comment, then it goes to the council comment discussion.
Let me know when it's my turn to talk.
Say, Matt, I'm definitely on the fence on this. I understand everybody's consideration. You know, I think your neighbor wrote a pretty compelling argument, you know, for specific use, and there are those. And I think we brought up all the potential concerns around enforcement, around, you know, billing on wastewater, and revenue loss. I mean, that's clearly been talked about. It clearly is an issue. I don't think anybody's shying away from that. But is there, is there a way to limit the use, and maybe if there are enforcement issues or other ways that there's a cost for a permit to go support the pieces that we believe we couldn't, we couldn't fund ourselves? I'm just kind of thinking through, you know, some of the things you mentioned could be done with more resources. And should that be, you know, passed on to the permit people? So I don't know if makes sense to just continue the discussion or not, but I do think from a conservation perspective, and, you know, I do think people would actually, I think we'd be surprised how few people would actually want to spend the money to go drill a well, right? I don't think it's a large number.
Can you explain, so I wasn't at the last meeting, but the contamination, the possible contamination of a well into the city water, how would that happen?
Rob, I'm gonna invite you up as a staff member to kind of answer that question on behalf of the city.
Well, you got it, Terry.
So, as we're all aware, backflow prevention devices, there are out there that prohibit this. Those, I assume, would require annual inspections, as we talked about, some sort of policing. I think that's like any other device, though they're mechanical. And my contention is that it's a mechanical device, it could fail. And if there's no cross connection, there's no problem. The problem would be if a cross connection occurred we didn't know about. I'm not willing to risk any sort of even accidental contamination. I mean, we all know what happened in Flint, Michigan. Same thing, different scale. An outside source was introduced.
Okay.
So I'm not, it's nothing personal. I understand the green side of it too, but I do believe that when you limit it to the very few folks, as you mentioned, that would want to or maybe have the means to do something like this, it is expensive to make a private well usable. By the time you drill it, case it, pumps, getting electric to it, expansion tanks, and then testing it. You're gonna have to use a water softener. I don't know. Really don't have much experience with them. I know that as you said, towns this size, it's very uncommon. Speaking with the Douglas County folks last week, Lawrence prohibits them. I wasn't aware of that, but apparently they do prohibit the wells within the city limits there. I believe Ottawa has some sort of an ordinance on theirs. But I guess the thing is I think we have to think about that. Are we allowing someone or a select few people to gain unfair advantage? I think it does come back to the everyone paying their share of the infrastructure cost, and we spend a significant amount of money every year on this infrastructure. We have to. The meters, the piping, our 2 elevated towers, our booster pump stations, we're selling a service. That service is to provide clean, safe drinking water to our customers, and they can trust that. And if you start introducing outside sources or potential outside sources, I mean, I think it's another one of those that it really complicates things. And I don't know what we're opening ourselves up to, because we would know that well exist. And if something did happen, I don't know what position that would put the city in if something did happen and it did get cross-connected. That's a lot of ifs, I understand that, but that's how we think. And we have to think long-term in all possible scenarios.
So I guess what I was thinking, and maybe just misunderstanding of how it works, but if it was limited use and there was, do you need a backflow preventer if it never enters the home or is not even attached to the potable water system? It's a separate,
I wouldn't think so.
It's a separate.
So it would be the only two, so it'd be for people who are both capitalizing on their own well investment and connected to city water, and then the potential of that going wrong and being corrupt.
Right.
But yeah.
That's my question.
Yeah.
And I will say this, backing up, I did speak to Mr. Flory about this, and he did ask me about that, and I did tell him that we didn't allow that. And it was, the best knowledge I had was we don't allow that. And I did also tell Mr. Flory that if somehow circumstances changed and a well permit was issued to him, he would have to pick. He couldn't have both. You'd either have to be on well full-time or you'd have to be on city water. You could not cross-connect, and Mr. Flory was talking about that at that time, being able to cross-connect. And and I was sure of that. I knew you couldn't have both. And Once we had that conversation, I didn't hear anything more out of Mr. Flory about that, so I just assumed that he decided that he wanted and received his city water connection for that. And so I wanted to clear, that conversation actually did happen with Mr. Flory.
So Rob, if there is contamination, what is the process from there? I mean, what do you have to do to clean the water?
Well, once we found out about it would probably be during a field test. The field test had come up bad, and so it'd either be that specific neighborhood would have to go on a boil order. We'd have to figure out what caused it, where it came from, start tracking and tracing it back. Likely it would be that immediate area would be all that would be affected. But here again, I'm speculating a lot. I really don't know.
So I'm not sure I got my question answered. I mean, is there not a possibility to have a completely separate, I mean, the ordinance would not allow you to even try to cross connect. You would have a well for irrigation.
Absolutely.
Well,
That's
this one
true.
just doesn't address that.
My question is that something that is kind of a partial? I mean, I fully support the cross-connect issue, the backflow prevention, the enforcement of all that. I think there'd still be a little bit of enforcement to make sure that if it's illegal to cross-connect, that they didn't at some point in the future go cross-connect. I mean, that would be the only risk. But to me, I think just from an irrigation perspective, I'm not sure it's economically feasible unless you're, got an orchard in town.
I was on a pond though.
For some of the rationale that people brought up, hey, I just want to water my lawn and my trees, which they probably aren't doing today. So I'm not concerned about the revenue loss there because it's just probably not happening. So if they wanted to drill a well to irrigate, is that a partial solution here?
My only question is how would you govern that? If somebody just cross-connecting?
Well, again, it's an enforcement issue that you would have to, write an ordinance appropriately, and then you would have to have inspection capability. If someone had to willfully go against that, and then, you're right, you would have that possibility going forward. Which is a little less likely, in my opinion, than maybe a mechanical backflow preventer failing. I mean, I think that just happens.
But it's all underground, so I guess if you cross-connect, it'd be underground, so I don't know how you'd inspect it.
If it was done without our knowledge, we wouldn't.
Right.
It theoretically could be done that way, yes.
Right. Instead of in the
I like
house.
that idea in theory, but it feels like a slippery slope to me.
Yeah, it could be.
I grew up on well water.
I grew up on well water.
That's why, I do sympathize, I really do.
Yeah.
I mean, whether or not that's enough to overcome all the concerns that have been listed, I don't think so. But I definitely understand the benefits.
I think in committee, we saw this as the best possible protection, that we understood all the points, but we were looking to cover as much as we could.
Any other questions for Rob? Any other further council discussion?
I'll throw out one more thing to maybe bridge what Scott was saying. Maybe if we wanted to explore down the road, if you had a property large enough to where your well could be a certain distance from where you would have to connect to the city water, that might be something to explore, maybe discuss further. There would become a point where it would be just so obvious that you're digging 500 feet from your well to wherever you would connect to the city that I don't think it could go unnoticed, and maybe that would be something to discuss.
I think that was the intent of putting the 200 foot from the property line in there because.
That would address that, that's true. Yeah.
To try to give some leeway that if properties did start annexing and so far out.
That's why I clarified earlier, but that's how far your property is from a water source, not how far your well is from the water source.
But if you're using the well to, just plain devil's advocate.
So am I.
If you're using the well to water your garden and your trees, you would have to pipe it unless you have a really long water hose. I guess running across the, I'm just trying to think through this.
I mean, that's why we're here.
I guess I'd support the ordinance, but I'd also support, some exceptions added to it if we could figure it out as we go.
Like most properties in town, if you were to put a certain distance from your water source to where you connect to the city water from your well, I mean, I think that would need to be far enough that I think a lot of properties in town would probably not even fall into that category where they can build one. This would be for the people on the edge of town maybe, or maybe there's a few properties inside of town where they can get away with it, but I think that the idea being that it would be such a far distance that it would go unnoticed, it wouldn't go unnoticed.
Yeah, under the assumption that city staff drive by while the work is being done.
Right.
And that would also alleviate the wastewater issue as well, right? 'Cause
It wouldn't be going to your sewer. Unless it went into the city gutter.
So while we're here talking about that, what are you guys thinking? What's that magic distance so that when the committee re-engages in this ordinance, that they have an idea or a direction? Or we can amend this ordinance and send it back and bring it back. I mean, I guess, what are you guys thinking on that? So we have some sort
I'm just
of.
looking for a way to move in the right direction. It may not be doable, but, I mean, the revenue loss, I think we talked about, if it's a specific use, that's not an issue. The wastewater may not be an issue. The enforcement's gonna be the issue. And I don't think we thought through that, what that would look like. And maybe you can do things to enhance that, require, I don't know. I'm not gonna figure it out tonight.
No. But, for example, like if you had a pond on your property and if you lived in town and you had a sizable pond, I mean, there's guys, down in Lynn County that have pumps that go from their pond all the way out to their garden. What's the difference if it's underground versus if you're pumping above ground? I mean, and there's no way that it would be such a far distance that it would never connect. I don't know, I think it's a worthy conversation to maybe keep going.
I agree.
Yeah.
Julie?
Yeah, I think we can talk about it more. I think that it has to really be, it has to be concrete in order to know that they're not going to connect to the water.
Right.
To the city water.
And I just don't know how you,
I don't either.
That's in committee, we felt it should be citywide.
Right.
But once again, you pointed that out in the ordinance, we'll have to look at that, what that allows for.
Well, we got a lot of good ideas from citizens already, and I'm not discounting they might come forward with some unique ways that we can make it work.
I do have one more question for Rob. Do we allow cisterns in town? Do you know?
Cisterns? There may be some old ones still from some of the old farmhouses, but none active that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Mine has one that's covered in concrete. Yeah.
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 All right, well, we will send this back to committee.
So what would you like us to focus on with this in committee?
I guess I'd like to hear some direction from Scott or specifically on what you guys
I
think.
think we heard about the special use that people would like to use it for. We understand the staff's concerns. I mean, is there a way that we could draft something that met both sides? And I think we're down to the enforcement piece is really the sticking point. And I think that special use would be, let's define it, special use or uses. think that would be part of what we need to do. I think, you know, when you get into, you know, rinsing dirt off of dirty cars, as Mr. Floor indicated, then we have the wastewater issue there, right? So there are certain cases that we may have more issues than if it's just limited to just landscaping use. But all those things, I think.
So are you thinking within like so many feet from any city water line? Are you thinking, I mean, is that kind of where you're looking at? Or what? I know you can easily limit uses, but again, I think that goes back to the enforcement piece of how are we gonna regulate that? You know, how do we anticipate city staff to verify that at some point after the well's been dug, after the water lines and the final inspection's done, that somebody can come back in?
That's the enforcement issue that if we can't resolve, it probably doesn't work. I'm not sure there's an answer to that.
There may not be.
Certainly stiff penalties and fines. I mean, you can put deterrence in there, but it's not a complete, and then you have to go enforce it, right? You have to actually inspect and try to figure out how you could possibly inspect it and figure it out that it's going on. And don't know how that would work.
Right, and that was our conversation several times, is we just don't have that department that can do that.
Historical water use bills is one way. I mean, all of a sudden it drops to, you know, there are ways potentially we could use current information that we have to indicate that something's going on. I'm just thinking out loud.
I mean, there would be a significant difference, I would guess, between a well water sample and a city-treated sample, chlorine in it, right? And so, I mean, if you just go take a sample out of someone's tap, that's your answer right there.
Yep.
But again, that's city staff to be going to people's houses and taking samples.
But again, it's part of the permit process, and there may be a fees associated with allowing somebody the time that you're gonna have to go out and do that.
Right.
Once a month, or however times we think it's appropriate to do it. And then
That kind of goes back to Brian, his research, that our city doesn't have the staff to do that.
Right now in Chicago, they're trying to try to find all the wells that they have in Chicago, private wells. Seems like whenever something comes up, it comes up everywhere when you look for it. But we could definitely take it back and talk about it.
I guess it's one more thing, right, the staff has to do, but I'd love to see some analysis about what that time looks like. Is it a full person? Is it, you know, based on X number of wells? I mean, what if it's 2 wells? What if it's...
Or 5.
Or 5.
Or 10.
Or 10. Show me some number. What's it gonna take? I mean, what do we expect that to cost us from a city staff time perspective? And then we have some real, like, hey, we either go get it from the permit, you know, recipients, or we can't afford to do it.
Okay, we'll bring it back to committee. All right, next item on the agenda is the well permit. Sir, would you like to get up and address the council?
My permit for the well, normally if a permit's denied, I would go before a Board of Appeals, and it would be a little bit different setting here, so I would like to ask for a little bit more latitude for back and forth, as this is more of an appeal process, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, I mean, if the council has questions for you, they are more than welcome to.
So I spoke since our last meeting here, 3 weeks ago, I spoke with Andrew down at the Douglas County Environmental Services Department, and he made a clarification for me. So what he told me was that he was not denying my permit. He said simply, I don't need his permission. He said the jurisdiction is with the city down here and with the code that's adopted. So he said that as far as within the city limits here, what he offers is a state provided method for resource for the well inspection and the water testing afterwards, which is an agreement they already have with the city of Lawrence and so forth. So essentially, he said I need to just put in permit with you guys. Last week I came down and did that. I put in an application for a water well permit. There wasn't a specific permit application for that, so I just put it on the general construction. I did ask for a confirmation of the receipt of that permit. I was told I would get that. I've still not received that. I do have a copy of that permit application though. I was told on that day, without even a review of my permit, that it was going to be denied. I've expected that, but I kind of expected to at least get a fair review of my permit on the basis of anyone putting in my permit rather than just outright denial. So I did ask about the appeal process, and my understanding was that there was a Board of Appeals for that. I've been told that's not the right route, and that to come before you guys and discuss this then. So I would like to make a couple comments here as far as some things you already discussed the previous meeting and just in this last section. As far as unlawful connections, cross-connecting illegally, the code does already deal with that. It's in the plumbing code already in the water supply and distribution section. It's already deals with unlawful connections. The code also has another section that deals with the enforcement of it and the penalties. It's already all there in the code. So no real issues there as far as that. You can find all that resource in the code that you have adopted, the 2003 code, and the further resources that the state supplies code-wise. Backflow prevention devices. The code states that the devices or assemblies installed in potable water supply systems for protection against backflow shall be maintained in good working condition by the person or persons having control of such devices, which puts the responsibility of testing and so forth for the backflow on the homeowner, the property owner, etc., the business owner, that sort of thing. It's really, the code puts it there so that there's no confusion about which jurisdiction has to come in from the outside and do it. As far as inspecting and enforcement of someone puts in a well and later on makes an illegal cross connection and it causes a problem, that's already all built into the code, the enforcement for that. Now, as far as the testing, whereas you go around and test your water supply, yes, that's up to you guys. But the legal precedent for how to deal with it, if there is a contamination issue, if there's an illegal cross connection made, no problem. The city code itself already has, as far as water meters go, which is an underground feature. Well, it has it's accessible at the meter, but you already have the legal precedent for unlawful connections there. You have a meter, you own the meter, anybody connects to it, there's penalties for it, and potential penalties for any contamination that results from it. That's for anyone who has a water supply and without permission, without paying the fee, the meter fee, goes and connects it and turns it on. So it's really quite simple to just remove the meter device and lock the meter valve with a lock as any utility company does if they cut off someone's water supply for non-bill payment or such things. It's already those systems are already built in place. You guys do that also. If you shut off someone's water, you go put a lock on the meter. So it's not really an issue there. My well permit, the well I'd like to put in, I have no intention of making a cross connection. I would be happy to even dig up my line if they would, from the house to the meter, if it would remove any question there. I do not have any intention for a cross connection, so there's no issue there. I've been told that the code prohibits the drilling of a well where there's an existing water system, and my viewpoint on that is if it's already so clear, and I'm not talking about a well 20 years ago that got denied, that really doesn't count legally as a precedent. There was no code amendment at the time to deny a well. It was just a policy or opinion or whatever. If the code is so clear already about not allowing wells where there's a public water system, then there shouldn't be any need for an amendment here. So as far as my permit application being in before this amendment, I don't really see a conflict there. I've spoken with other people that are familiar with code, and they agreed, if the code prohibited wells, then anywhere there's a code adopted, there wouldn't be any private water wells. It just couldn't happen then. So clearly there's, as I've explained in the past, there's the allowance of the well in the code, and if there's a cross connection that can be made, it does require permission. It can't do that without it, and it does require a backflow device. So there's apparatus already in the code to allow the use of a well and how to do it, how to keep the things separate or connected safely. I would like to go ahead and drill my well because I do not see anything in the code so far, and I've met with other people familiar with codes that there's not really an issue here. So that's it for the moment. If you have any questions.
We did review your application, was it building permit? What you filled out.
Yes.
That was presented to the committee, so
Okay.
we did see it.
Okay.
Any other questions for Mr. Nelson?
I guess just want to be clear, this is going to be used for household only, is what you're proposing.
I haven't entirely decided whether it's going to be just an irrigation or house. That is, I believe, up to my discretion by my understanding of the code. But I do not intend to make any kind of cross connection.
Is any part of your property in a flood zone?
Yes,
It is.
yes.
How much of your property? Because I even know, I think in the county they won't allow a well.
Yes, there's a
Within
distance
so many feet
require,
of-
there's a distance requirement. There is a map with the city that delineates the route of the floodplain through my property. I've already checked that and measured. I easily meet that distance requirement. All the standard distances that are required separations, my property, I've got a large section in the middle that meets all of them with no issue, no conflict anywhere.
Any other questions for Mr. Nelson? Thanks, sir.
I have one more comment, if that's okay.
Go.
So I have spoken with Kansas KDHE, Pam Chaffee, with the head of the water well program, and Katie, can't remember her name. Katie Basiotis. So what they told me when it comes to areas of overlapping jurisdiction, where there's an unknown. Does the county do this? Does the city do this? Who's responsible for what? So they told me that how the water well permit program works, because this is one of the reasons I was told I was being denied the water well permit, was that there was not a permitting process in place here. So what they've told me is that the water well permitting process is a restrictive process, meaning if you've got an area in the United States, or let's say Kansas, where that's undeveloped and a development is made and a jurisdiction boundary is set up, what that jurisdiction can do is then adopt a code, ordinance, whatever, and restrict water wells within that district. And outside of that district, there's not really a permitting process. So they told me that the county is correct here, that they don't have jurisdiction within the city of Baldwin. The city of Baldwin has a jurisdiction here. So they told me that the 2003 code and even the newer codes do allow all the way up to the 2021 code, they do allow water wells. When a city has its jurisdiction and they want to limit water well use, they have to then either have a permitting process or an ordinance prohibiting sort of thing in order to have any control. So what they told me was that actually I don't even need a permit at this point for a water well. She said I can go ahead and drill my well, and the date of my application for the well is the starting timeline that gives me the legal intent to drill at this point. So essentially I can walk out of here and drill my well, and I still have to meet the state inspection testing guidelines, cross connections. I still have to meet all the code requirements. I do have to meet some sort of agreement about the sewer issue. The code book does allow me actually to put in a gray water system. My property does meet the current guidelines to put in a gray water system. I can do that separately. I can put my whole house on that. I could do partial partial in the city, partial that, or one or all the other. However, I'm pretty amenable to working something out there. I don't want to put in a gray water system. So what I'm basically here is to say what I want to do is work with you guys on how to do this, and I'm not going to just go, I'm going to drill my well and do it the way that however, because there are some areas here that do need to work on. So that's basically what I'm coming to you with, is I would like to work out whatever needs to be worked out, but I do intend to drill my well. So if there's no other questions, that's it. And I don't know if you guys need to meet again to, approve or deny my appeal or whatever, how you want to do that, but that's pretty much it for now.
Any other questions for Mr. Nelson?
I think I asked you this last time. It sounds like you haven't decided what your use is gonna be, or maybe you have and you're just leaving your options open. Would you be amenable to just irrigation only?
Possibly. I'm considering putting my house on it, yes. I have not decided entirely yet. And right now, I would like to leave that option to my discretion within the confines of the code. I have no issue with the cross connection and that sort of stuff, so.
I appreciate that. Appreciate you coming forward and in the spirit of working it out. That's why I'm asking if, as you heard our discussion, I think there's much more, at least there's some interest in maybe finding an irrigation-only type of well permit.
Yes.
And so, you know, until we know where you're at on that, I guess it's gonna be hard to really understand, because I think what you also heard is there's very little interest in allowing, multi-use, home use, backflow preventers, cross connect and all of that. So I'm just trying to gauge your willingness to maybe limit what you would do as part of this process of working with the city before we ever come up with an ordinance.
I would say,
Because, by the way, our practice has been no wells, right? So,
yes.
I mean, that's been the practice, and I think
And
what
I
this council's
understand
wanting to
that.
try to do is, put the ordinance around what our practice has been.
Yes.
And that's, I think, what we're trying to do here.
I do understand that. My standpoint is just that right now there is no ordinance on it.
Understand.
So, I would say then, as far as purposes of my application, that it'd probably best to say that I'd probably put my house on, so that we can work down from there rather than trying to go the other way.
Okay.
So it will make it easier for you guys to decide how to do it then, rather than meeting again to discuss it once I do decide.
So then, I guess, why did you put in a permit? I mean, it sounds like you have your mind made up that you're going to drill a well already and connect your house to it. And you seem confident in the fact that you have the legal ability to do that, so why even put in a submitted one?
Well, the first instance I came in to put in a permit with the county was in a discussion with a guy that works in a water district somewhere else. And so he was explaining to me how this goes in his jurisdiction where there is public and private water well system. And so that's how I wound up putting in my permit with the county. So my intent is to stay within a workable relationship here rather than just going out and doing it anyway, which I believe I'm legally allowed to do, and I don't want to be that way. My primary intent as far as putting in a well was first irrigation. I have a large garden on I have big bellies to feed back there. And I depend on my garden to a great extent to provide food for my family. So that's really the driving reason behind here. And then since I'm gonna do that and I gotta run everything into my house anyway, I'd have considered just adding the house onto that, yes. So that's kind of where this has all come from.
Any other questions?
It's the only other scenario there would be not connecting to the city water, just using your well solely for all your purposes. Is that an option? Just
Yeah.
no cross connect. It's
No
disconnect.
cross connection, disconnected.
Is that what you're planning to do? Is you're not?
If I use my house, there would be nothing there. I would even be willing to literally go with an excavator and dig up my line to the meter to remove that. Any idea that there would be.
But you still intend to use our sewer system?
Right. That'd be
Yes.
yeah.
So I have.
Right.
I'm quite willing to work with the cost issue that would be associated there, and whatever might go along with that.
Good. Thanks. That's all the questions I have.
Anybody else? Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Anybody else from the public like to speak to this agenda item? Jerry, would you like to step up and speak?
Your turn.
This is your turn.
Oh, it's my turn?
Yeah.
I get to say something?
You get to get up to the mic and say something.
You don't have to.
You don't have to, but you can.
But you can.
How much time you got? You're talking about the You asked the question about how does the well get contaminated?
Well, that was I was clarifying whether or not they intended to use both city and well water. That's eliminated.
Most generally,
Right.
water wells get contaminated through agricultural products or fertilizer or whatever it is that you use on your yard.
Right. I meant, my point was to clarify, would you be using both well
And-
water as well as city water? That's how it would get cross-connected. I know how wells can get.
You got
arsenic, I mean-
you got two scenarios that's been brought out here. The last one and the one before that with the gentleman who's going to use the water for his business.
Right.
I don't know, there's information that hasn't come out that would interest me. If he brings his water, if he drills his well, first of all, how does he know there's water there to drill? How deep is it going to be? What kind is it going to be? And what does he have to do to soften it? If he runs that into a building where he puts it in a container and he fills that container with salt brine, makes the salt brine to soften the water and runs it back out, and it never comes in contact with the water from the city, I don't know how you could worry about a cross connection. But if he brings them in and puts both lines together, then you got a problem.
Right.
But his water's gonna have to be softened probably somewhat, if he gets enough water to do it. To take care of the sewer system, probably, in my opinion, and it's only my opinion, is that you would go back to his highest water bill at that business, and that would be the price that he would pay for his sewer system for years on down the road. Whether that makes sense to you or not, it makes kind of a fair option there.
That business in particular is brand new, so you wouldn't have much of a.
Drilling a water well, as I understand it, in the county, you have to be 25 feet away from a septic system, not a sewer line, to have a well. To lay a water line, like if we lay a water line across country, and I've laid them, I have to be 25 feet away from the existing lateral systems.
Correct. What we're talking about on feet is if they're within 200 feet of a city service, they had to connect. That's how our sewer system set up.
Is that a written,
That's in the ordinance.
that's in the city ordinance? Now, I don't care how you do it either way. I was just trying to get some more information so I could think about it myself.
Yeah, that's where the feet came in, is connecting two city services if they're within X number of feet.
In the cross connection part of it, there are some of those cross connections that I have seen. Usually, years ago, they placed those at the bottom of a meter pit in the rural area. And if that's not serviced from time to time, some of those backflow things go bad. The worst thing about it is it's happening every day in town. I saw it today, where we don't know if a man's backflow system is working or not, but he's got a garden hose hooked to one of those sprayers, and he's spraying flowers with fertilizer. If something happened to that line, his line coming into his house, and it broke, it causes a suction, and it's going to pull that water right back through his house. So your cross connections is neither here nor there, really, in some cases. I don't have anything else to say, and thanks for listening to me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming up.
And something?
I'll be back.
I can, for the.
Was that a mic drop before we walk out the door? Was that a mic drop before we walk out the door?
As far as the sewer fees, at least for industrial wells, the state requires you to meter it. You have to put a meter on there and report those readings to the state every year. So those same meter readings could be used for sewer fees with the city. So that's for industrial. For residential, I mean, it could have a meter on it, same as the meter coming from the city water that you could take a reading from, would be no different. So,
It's good information.
that's all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Anybody else like to speak to this agenda item? Yes, sir.
One last thing. I think that's a great idea as far as the sewer. I would be totally fine with putting on the house side of the use, you guys can put a meter on there. I have no problem with that. If you want to monitor my house use and charge sewer off that, no problem. Be totally fine with me.
Anybody else like to speak to this agenda item? All right, council discussion. This agenda item.
Let's go back to committee, right? Julie's on that. I thought she nodded her head there earlier.
I heard that, yeah.
Well, yeah, we can discuss it further.
I mean,
Different things have been brought up tonight, so.
I think if we can just gauge the temperature again, I think everyone agrees, we don't want them, we don't want you to have them both.
Right.
Right? Okay.
Yes.
For sure. Right, we at least know that.
Is this gonna be a hostile committee or?
Do we meet again before the next meeting, next council
We
meeting?
meet Thursday.
Okay, there you go.
All right, I guess we will send it back to Quinn.
Okay. We'll do it.
All right, next agenda item, strategic planning proposal. Glenn, what we got?
Okay, yeah, with this in your packet, we asked Patty Genthrop there from KU, who did the strategic planning session with us last year, to submit the follow-up to that. So you got a couple of different options. One is, I believe, tied to in-person meetings, the other one's virtual, whatever. So you should pretty much do the same thing for the rec commission. I think last year, the year before, I forget which year she actually did that. So this is the part 2 of the strategic planning that we're talking about. So you see your proposal and what that would cost going forward. She's out of her office here for about a month, I believe, coming back here in August. And then we'll pick it up here probably in the fall and move forward then.
So it's the same process that the rec did?
Much as I understand it, yeah.
Same.
The focus groups and.
Focus groups and the public outreach part of this thing is the next part, because, so remember, we met as a group and kind of laid out what our priorities were and everything, and so the next step was to engage the public and go forward and do that, and I believe that's how the rec commission approached their strategic planning, and so we're kind of following their footsteps with this process.
I think there were 2 different options on there. One of them had virtual town hall meetings and the other was in person. I prefer in person.
Yeah, I was looking at that too.
Yeah.
$10,000 difference, but
Right.
I think we all know how much you get out of a virtual meeting and how much you get out of an in-person
Yeah,
meeting.
so much more value, for sure.
I would agree on that.
So-
I've had enough virtual meetings for a lifetime, to be honest with you, but they keep coming. But anyway, yeah, I think for something like this, it's the better option, as it would be in person.
Yeah.
So what are we gonna get out of this?
From what I remember from when the rec did it, was she pretty much coordinated all the focus groups, got those together, met with them, took all that data, and then she compiled it into one big document for the rec.
Right.
From what I can recall.
I believe the rec board tried to stay out of it as much as they could so that it was more
Citizen-based.
pure
Yeah.
reaction from citizens.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. So the last one that we all did, that was kind of how we as a council and the governing body kind of wanted to move forward with the strategic plan. This would be the part to include what the citizens specifically want with some feedback to guide us as we move forward.
That's good.
So from a budget perspective, how does this work, Glenn? Is this built into this next year's budget? This year?
Depends on where, but probably be about half this year and probably half next, I would think, the way it'll fall, because I think she'll start here in the fall. I don't know if we'll get it all done,
Right.
because I know she's working on a number of other cities right now, and they're in front of us in her queue, so probably half this year, half next year, and we'd be looking at probably economic development funds for this.
And we have those funds available.
Yeah, you would have that budget authority in cash right now on hand, so.
Any further council discussion on this agenda item? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Just gotta make sure we move that option.
Yeah, there's any verbiage, we're gonna have to wing it.
What's the funding amount? That's pretty much what we need for,
Yeah, okay, so we.
It was around 30, I mean, I think the motion can be to accept the proposal with the in-person
Annotated agenda.
Okay.
option. I don't think you need to say the exact number or anything.
Okay, I move we approve the proposal from KU for the in-person community meetings.
second.
I'll third it.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is a resolution for Kansas Housing Assistance Program. Glenn, I'm gonna have to rely on you on this.
This is just, the state is asking us to pass a resolution to, well, that's what it looks like, to support the Kansas Housing Assistance Program, which that is strictly pro forma. They're not asking us for money or anything else. It's just a resolution to support. So I think they ask every city to do this.
I have a question. Why does it say Sedgwick County, Kansas, and Shawnee County, Kansas? and
Yeah, that's all right. I think because they're, like I said, they're doing this all over the state, and somebody dropped that in there and didn't realize where, yeah.
So this doesn't take any funds, because I read in here where it says that we will develop some sort of fund to help fund purchasing or something.
I have a couple of just key points that they sent
Okay.
regarding this. So it's assistance is offered at levels of 5% to the first mortgage amount. They're responding to home buyer and lender requests to expand the program area. Jurisdictions benefit by offering this program and home ownership opportunities to their constituents. Home buyers must meet income, credit, and program requirements. It's for people who have jobs and pay their bills but need assistance in funding the down payment or closing costs. There's no cost to your city for participation in this program. Sedgwick and Shawnee counties pay the startup costs and the ongoing operational costs for the program.
This is odd. Sedgwick and Shawnee.
I think
So
Douglas
they
County
said
already
that
has it.
They
The
mentioned
others-
that in there.
They do have a program.
We
so I
just
think
got
that's
briefed by
the-
whoever was coming in.
The other counties or the other areas in Douglas County are Eudora, Lawrence, and Lecompton that are participating.
So everyone does.
So,
It's a county.
so it doesn't cost us any money?
No, it costs the county. I mean, that's, yeah, so they've got the county mixed up in there.
Somewhere in Wichita, they're like.
Yeah, wait a minute, we don't do this here, yeah.
We're funding this for that?
Right.
Okay. Any council discussion on this agenda item?
Just thinking back to when we did have our strategic planning workshop, this really does meet some of the things that we were talking about, opportunities for all. We mentioned affordable housing, those type of things. I support it.
All right, well, I will entertain a motion.
I'll wing the last one.
I move we authorize execution of the cooperation agreement pursuant to the Kansas Local Residential Housing Finance Law with Sedgwick County, Kansas, and Shawnee County, Kansas, and Baldwin City.
Things in a pod.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Been moved to second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next item is appointment of the Rural Housing Incentive District Advisory Committee. So this is a program that was mention to the city that just opened up from the state of Kansas. They changed their rules and regulations, I guess, for rural housing. And before, we were in a county that did not qualify for the program. Now they removed that county restriction, so that allows us, since we're a smaller rural city, to qualify for this program. So as mentioned, to put together a advisory committee. I think you all had that in your packet. I selected these based off of, the majority landholders around the community, trying to get the school district in there, city staff, and then our council from our CDC and our finance committee. So we can get everybody in one room to kind of gauge, so we don't go through what we did for the NRP a few years ago, where we had to bounce around to different meetings multiple times and try to get it. So I tried to get them. And these people from the school board specifically, well, everybody's agreed to be on the committee, and then these were the selecteds from the school board to be on this committee. So, any questions about that? All right, I will entertain a motion.
I move we approve, actually, I'm on the committee, let's do it.
You're on the council, it's all right.
Yeah. I didn't vote myself in. Who'd you vote for? That is a secret ballot. Here's my democratic right.
I'm not voting that one.
Wow. Okay.
Good one, Scott.
That was.
I move we approve the RHID advisory committee.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Council committee reports, budget and finance.
Yeah, you have my notes from the last Budget and Finance Committee. The only amendment I want to make to that is the line in there that talks about the NRP houses being on the program year one and then go into the existing. Actually, they go in after the 5-year. So it still doesn't affect the existing, just a bigger rebate amount that the city's rebating. So just wanted to correct that in the notes, but that was it. I think the next meeting is Friday, which I may have to move, but
Do you need to move it?
I may, yeah. Might need to move it to the next week.
Okay.
If that
Move the
works.
finance committee a week. Corey, does
That's
that work for
fine.
you?
Yeah, that work for you.
Okay.
So, a week from Friday, 7:45. You have
Sure,
any
you're not here
conflicts?
in Colorado.
Saturday.
Oh, okay. Community development, Corey.
Yeah, we met on June 28th. Had a few items, discussed the RID committee that was presented to us and then presented to council. Discussed the fireworks ordinance. We had a lot of people, I'm guessing somebody's gonna mention that. A lot of emails and such, asking if it was necessary to go to the midnight. We had some good discussion around that. I don't know, it's something that we probably need to discuss down the road before the next 4th of July, about how we want to tackle that. I think most people's concerns, as far as everyone I've talked to, and I'm sure y'all can echo it, is the duration. It seems like it kind of went on for about a week, and the hours till midnight was kind of the issue. Some of the feedback we got, the sun doesn't really go all the way down. It seems like till 9:45-ish. So people do need a window, I feel like, to shoot off their fireworks and enjoy their 4th of July. But I definitely also can sympathize with those who don't work a traditional schedule or don't care to hear fireworks going off at midnight and stretched beyond. So, I think the idea is to not necessarily kick the can down the road on that, but to definitely have some discussion in the near future before, obviously, long before the 4th of July next year, and see how we can deal with those concerns. The only other thing, we discussed amending the alcohol ordinance to include breweries. Next meeting is July 26th at 4 p.m., second floor City Hall.
Public safety, Susan.
We have not met since the last meeting, and our next meeting is scheduled for the 13th at 4 o'clock.
Public works, Julie.
We haven't met since the last meeting either, and we are going to meet Thursday about water wells.
Have you spoken about that yet?
I'm interested to hear what's happening.
All right, Legislator Brian.
Well, I too was gonna bring up fireworks.
Okay.
The ordinance behind that, but since Corey's got it, can, I guess, live in your committee. I understand, it's fine if that's,
It's your discretion where it goes. I don't mind.
That's where it came out of when we.
right,
When we
no,
changed
that's
it,
fine.
so-
I mean,
Okay.
I'm glad that you brought it up.
Sure, yeah.
Because I feel the same way, that it's good to take a look at it and kind of review how we came to that decision. I tried explaining to the citizen that emailed all of us what I remember, but it probably wasn't a perfect memory of it. But I like your idea of thinking about things well before
Yeah.
we get to that point. So I don't know what else we would have to work on, Scott. Casey, can you think
I
of?
think we'll probably end up, once this rig committee comes through, if we have to develop an ordinance or stuff, we're gonna probably be circulating that through.
So I believe our meeting was scheduled for the 14th, that's what the website says, I can't remember if that's what we decided, but if we don't have anything, I don't see any reason to meet.
I second that.
Okay, so if we could.
It's not, it's a,
Well, I don't
know.
Anybody needs to.
We're on the second hour.
But I like that you brought up the fireworks, that's great.
City administrator staff comments.
Before you go, I think we all had the same probably input, and we all saw the email on the fireworks. I know you've got a packed agenda, but my only suggestion would be you don't wait. I mean, it's fresh now.
Sure.
You know, while everybody has, it includes the vendors and, people, so that would be my only recommendation is maybe before the end of the year, try to revisit it, not saying that it's gonna change at all, but.
That's good feedback. Thank you.
Start talking about Christmas now, when it's.
Yeah, don't wait.
Right.
All right, staff, city administrator comments.
I have no more comments about water wells or fireworks. We do have a new employee who started today. Emery, our new employee, you wanna tell us about who started today at City Hall, real briefly?
Stephanie Hayes started as our new front desk, and so she was amazing. It's just her and I right now, and she didn't really get a whole lot of training. It was like, jump right into it.
Jump right in.
That's
So
training.
you want-
Yes,
yeah,
because
that's-
today is, last day for payment before
Yeah.
door hangers and then shut off, so there was no time to, really delve into it, so she was on top of it.
So
That's awesome.
anyway, if you haven't met her yet or whatever, drop by City Hall and say hi to her, whatever. And then we have, next Monday, we also have
Court clerk?
new court clerk of the court, starting on Monday, so, all right.
All right,
Okay, that's it.
council comments. The only comment I have is, Scott, for finance committee, if you could kind of take control of that red, I'll send you all the contact information for everybody to set up meetings and stuff. Or you want that to go to Corey, what do you guys want?
Delegate. You want to cut it in half?
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
Co-chairs?
We'll probably have an arm wrestling. thing.
Yeah. He's taller.
Yeah,
All
More
right,
fulcrum. but
I'll send
that's
the
fair.
contact information to both you.
younger.
Younger.
No executive session needed, so I will take a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
Second.
Been moved to second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion